during the time of the Prophet, the Prophet, the Quran is his biggest mission. It's his miracle. You think that the Prophet would not die and not care about the Quran? Some people, they come and they make it seem like, yeah, the Prophet, he read the Quran and he didn't tell people who is the leader after them. He didn't gather the Quran. He didn't do anything, and he died as if nothing has happened. No. The Prophet told people who the leader is. And the Prophet made sure that the Quran is being compiled. The Quran is being gathered. He tells people, place this ayah in this surah, place this surah here, and this number here and there. We have many narrations where the Prophet, he organized the Quran. And he tells them where the verses should be within the surahs. This is one. And the Quran was written on parchments. It was written on pieces of leather. It was written on pieces of bones. And it was gathered in the house of the Prophet. After the death of the Prophet, there were two simultaneous compilations of the Quran going on at the same time. One was Imam Ali alayhi salam. He was in his home. He says, I would not, he says, I promised not to leave the house or not to do anything personal until I finish compiling the Quran. So he gathered what was written on the bones and the leather and all of these things, and he made it into a book, basically. And he comes out and he brings it to the Muslims, ala himli ba'ir, carrying it on a camel. Because at that time we didn't have paper like today. So he has the whole Quran. And according to our narrations and scholars, they say that Imam Ali not only had the Quran, all of it written down, but he also had the interpretations of every verse. So he says that this verse came down in this event, this is the tafsir, this is the ta'wil, he's giving the exact tafsir of the verses. He comes and he brings it to the Muslims. Abu Bakr and several of the others, Zayd ibn Thabit and others, they're sitting, and he shows them, فَعَرَضَهُ عَلَيْهِمْ, they see the Quran, and then they tell him, لَا حَاجَةَ لَنَا بِقُرْآنِكَ, we don't need your Quran right now. So here, some people, they come and they say, oh, the Shi'as have a different Quran, this is the Quran of Ali, because why would they not? Our scholars, they say, it's the same Quran, it's the same verses, but the organization of the surahs, several things that make it different. One is that this one, it had the tafsir, and the Quran right now that we have doesn't have the tafsir. So they didn't want that. And another thing that they say makes it different is that this Quran, the first surah, this is one opinion now, the first surah was Surah Al-Alaq. So it came down according to the order of the verses that were revealed. This is one opinion. Others, they say, no, the order that it's right now, that's how it's supposed to be. Those are some opinions. But the opinion that they rejected it mainly because it had the tafsir. Now, this is one gathering. There was another gathering that was taking place immediately or soon after the death of the Prophet, was that there were several battles that took place after the death of the Prophet. They called them Hurub al-Ridda, the apostasy wars. In fact, they weren't really 100% apostasy wars. Some people, they would come, Arabs that were living around Medina, they would come and they would see, oh, someone else is sitting on the minbar. Rasulullah had told them Ali ibn Abi Talib is going to be. They come and they see someone else, so they turned around and they left. And they said, we don't want to have to do with this particular government. Not that they're rejecting Islam as a whole. And there were some that did reject Islam. So in those apostasy wars, there were several Qurra al-Quran, several people who had memorized the Quran, they were being killed in those battles. So once they were being killed, the Muslims at that time, under the leadership of Abu Bakr and several others, they were worried that, because at that time the Quran was delivered in an oral culture. The culture of the Muslims did not, yes, the Quran did shift the culture into a writing culture. It encouraged people to write, to read, to seek knowledge. But at that time, all of Arabia was an oral culture. It was an oral transmission of hadith, oral transmission of verses. So these people who had memorized it, they were dying. So then they came, Abu Bakr, he ordered for them to gather. He brings a young man by the name of Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd ibn Thabit, he brings him, he tells him, anyone who comes to you and they bring they recite a verse and they bring two witnesses, you record that and you make it a part of the Quran. So they gather the Quran. Now Zayd ibn Thabit, he had his own manuscript. He had his own. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had his own. Ubay ibn Ka'b had his own. Several others, they had their own manuscripts. It was a Quran that was written. It was placed in the house of the Prophet during the time with Aisha, and then later on with Hafsa, because her father became the Khalifa. Then during the time of Uthman, the Muslim empire was growing. So now they were still that Quran that was written, they didn't rely on it. It was just sitting in the house. They were still relying on an oral culture. Then during the time of Uthman, the Muslim empire was growing, and there were many a'ajim, many non-Arabs, now becoming a part of the Muslim ummah. So just several, about 50 years after the death of the Prophet, there were more non-Arab Muslims than Arab Muslims. So now they can't rely on the oral culture anymore. They can't rely on that anymore. So then they start sending the manuscripts of the Quran. They start sending them to the Muslim countries, one to Egypt, and this was under the time of Uthman. And one other thing, ibn Mas'ud, the copy of Ubay ibn Ka'b and the others, he gathered them. They compared them. There was a committee that came and compared the versions. Then they burned the others, and they came and they copied one and they spread it in the Muslim world. Yes. So this is how the Quran was spread. And that thing that Uthman did, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he knew about it and he approved of it. He approved of that and he said, this is the way of preserving the Quran.